All right. Yeah. For those who know me, my name is Carol Jenner. I work at Redapt. I'm one of the BI architects. I think, well, I obviously know Rachel because her and I used to work together. And yeah, the focus of my work, other than building out dimensional models, is actually helping companies with their Power Platform and Power BI mostly, and helping them in a few areas. I'm hoping we can get through most of these. There's not a lot here. And with Power BI, it's very complex. So most of this is just gonna be like high level stuff that I deal with most of the time. But if there's certain areas you guys like, hey, can you bring Carol back? Because we really wanna know more, just feel free to, ask Lev, and then he's gonna owe me a lot when he asks me for that. So I'm just kidding. I'm actually happy to do this. I'm actually love what I do, and I love talking about Power BI. I will try to give you time for question and answer, but without further ado, let's jump into it. Okay, so you may have heard Power BI is part of the Power Platform now, and also in the future, it's going to be starting to get tied more with Synapse, but we'll just focus on what's currently here. Power BI works with Power Apps, Power Automate, and the Power Virtual Agents. And underneath in Power Apps, you hear about the Dataverse. It's all about the movement of data, but Power BI is the visualization of that data. As you know, Power BI is a Microsoft product, and it's been out there I've been working with it since it first came out. So let's see, it's been over 5-6 years it's been out there. I've seen it come a very long way. Before, I remember when it was way down here, and then Microsoft shut up, and now Tableau and all of them are trying to catch up. If you're not aware, there are there's 2 or 3 components depending on how you look at it. There is the desktop component that is free to everybody. So if you don't work in Power BI, it is free out there. You can download it. You can attach to 1,000 connectors. I'll show you in a minute. If you work for a company or even on your own, so if you want to use your own Microsoft account, you can log into a Power BI service. That too is somewhat free. However, in order to do anything in the service, you mostly need a pro license, and that's part of the Office integration. The service is there for sharing. So the whole idea of Power BI is collaboration. So the idea is that you build your reports on the desktop, you publish to the service, and then using mobile or your laptop, you can access the data. And down here is the gateways. You need a gateway if your data's on-prem or on your desktop. So the idea is that your data does not have to be in the cloud. Microsoft updates this all the time. This is probably even out of date. It can connect to almost anything. There are some like data flows, data sets. You can share data sets, and now data flows are coming, and streaming data flows are here. Azure Analytics is out there. It can talk to blob storage. It can talk to the Gen 2. It can talk to websites, which is kind of fun. So I think like when the Olympics was going on, they were encouraging people to attach to, I think, the NBC website, so you can do your own analysis of your team and stuff. So there's lots here. Any questions? All right, if I'm going too fast, let me know. I just want to make sure we cover everything. So these are, from a data architect's perspective, these are the 5 main areas that I get called on to help. The first one is a lot of companies need help with their governance, or they're just adopting Power BI and they want to know how to roll it out, how to use it, training's part of it, things like that. You probably have heard of Dashboard in a Day. There's a lot of training out there that's free from Microsoft, by the way. The other one is security and report access, confidential information. I don't really drill too much. I don't think I even talk about it here, but there's ways the information sensitivity labels can be applied that actually restrict access and things like that. Security, that kind of security is really confidential stuff, is really a lot of questions people have. And how can they restrict access, and how can they give access? The other area I get asked a lot is, do we need premium, or can we just stay with pro? So I don't know if you know, there's a premium version of Power BI, and then there's the pro version of Power BI. So I'll talk about like what premium is. So it's important to understand what is premium capacity versus what you normally have in Power BI. This fourth thing, which is kind of interesting, is sharing. A lot of people don't know how to share. There's certain things about sharing that people don't realize when they share. How do they share? What is the best way to share? Because there's so many options and the companies get confused. The last one is performance issues. I see this a lot around big data. I have a client now who's, they have millions and billions of records, and part of it is they couldn't get any performance out of Power BI. So there are certain things you need to look at with the data. So let's quickly go over governance. So there's two ways of governance you can think of. There's the tight control, where that's very IT centric, all the way down, you have the EDWs, they push the content out. And then there's the less controls where it's kind of like the Wild West. Oh, you want some data? Just go over here. Power BI can work with it. Most companies try to get somewhere in the middle. They don't want IT to be the bottleneck, but they also don't want to give up control because of confidential information. So right now there are 3 delivery approaches. There's the bottom up, top down, and the blended. Most companies I work with want this blended area. And the reason is, again, they don't want to be the bottleneck. They don't want to be the domain owners of all the data. Most IT groups, all they know is they just store the data. They handle, the delivery of the data, but they don't know the data itself. So you need the business to help explain the data, because they're the ones making business decisions off that data. I've worked in both environments where corporate BI is like, okay, we go out, we get all the requirements, and nothing ever really seems to get done because we're so busy getting requirements and trying to learn that, and then people feel like IT are the gatekeepers, and they're hiding all the data for themselves. And they feel like then what happens is the company, people get ingenious, they'll start finding data sources on their own. And then you end up in a situation even worse than that, where you need a data warehouse. So this is what a business-led self-service BI workflow would look like. So you have content creators, they're basically from the business side of it. They're using the workspaces, they're creating dashboards and reports, they're sharing them out, and the users are ingesting them. Nowhere in here is IT. So I'm going to skip this slide. I don't know why I didn't put it. So this is what the corporate one, where they locked everything down. So now IT is responsible for doing all of this. And so IT needs someone who understands or works with the business. So the team's going to be much greater. Same thing, but the key here is it's IT doing it. And then this is the blended. So you have IT creating data sets for businesses who don't have the capacity or don't have access or don't really understand how to create it. And then you have the dashboard creators, where IT has staged the data for them and said, here, go. And then again, they all share workspaces and the apps, which we'll talk about more in sharing. And then the users come in and then they can dip their information. So again, I think most companies, they really want this because there was a period in time where IT controlled everything. And now with a lot of these, I think they call it citizen apps like Excel, it allows, they need to open it up, and they know that. So any questions real quick? Okay. So the second part of governance is about adoption. Dominance is about adoption. So Microsoft UK actually created the Power BI adoption framework. You can look it up. There's some videos on YouTube about it. And I basically put together this slide. And there are a bunch of slides out there that go far into the what these pillars are. So there's basically 4 pillars. The governance. So we talked about the governance model. Did you want to be tightly controlled? Do you want the hybrid? Or you just want, no, I'm just going to provide data sources and let them deal with it. And then the governance also gets into, oh, I made a data set, now we have to change it, but if I change it, it affects 30 other things. So that's part of your data governance in terms of how changes are made, how things are rolled out. And also people are given the roles and responsibilities for that data too. The second one is about service management. This one here is setting up the tenant. There's a lot of crazy tenant settings you can do. You can restrict access to sharing. You can restrict access to downloading. You can open up a whole bunch of stuff, and then you can close everything down. So a lot of companies sit there and wonder, well, should I let everybody create a workspace? The general answer is no. But depending on the size of the company, it might be more advantageous. That way they're not relying on IT again. And then the third one obviously is security. Who has access? Who can share? Can people share this information outside the organization? And you can control all of that. And the third one is support, and this is where training happens. And this is some area a lot of companies don't really think too far ahead on, because it's like, oh, I'll just let our service desk handle it, but they've never been trained on what Power BI is or where to look. It tends to be a little confusing. So what they'll not do is they'll not go there. They'll just call Bob over in finance, because Bob's the one who knows this data, Bob the one who put the report together. So this is another area that you need to get people to think about. And then there are some factors on adoption. Every company in the world is on a BI journey. It doesn't matter if you're a mom and pop or you're big as Microsoft. Different areas of the company are on that journey separately. And one of the parts of that journey is having a data culture. And what that means is you're data driven. You're not like, oh, I feel like our sales aren't improving, but I know why. But so you make this decision that you're just gonna make all the salesmen sell more, right? But that's not the problem. The problem might be your supply chain can't keep up with the demand of the sales, so your sales are down because people can't get their goods. So the idea of a data-driven is that the company has this vision where they will use data to make the decision. So they will actually look at the data to decide, okay, how do we make these decisions? Why did we make these decisions? So everybody knows. The second one is corporate sponsorship. I've seen this a lot. This is actually an important factor if you're even doing a data warehouse. You need corporate or C-level for when you have those groups of businesses that just don't want to change. And sometimes when you're doing actual data warehouses, you have to get the processes to change because it's not creating good enough data to help provide your data-driven decision-making. So C-levels really help having that sponsorship there to say, hey, finance isn't really going to change, but the CFO is like, oh no, we're changing. We're going to fix our data. We're going to get good reports. So that's always important. The second is Power BI champions, like evangelicals like me, who go around and go, hey, Power BI is awesome. Have you tried it in Power BI? Let me show you how it works in Power BI. Just kind of push the idea. Part of this is to get people out of Excel. We've all seen it. There's Excel. People are like, oh yeah, I get the data out of the system and then I put it in Excel and then I manipulate it. It's like, yeah, that's great, but why don't we do it in Power BI and then we can share it? Because what happens, the Excel report gets shared around and suddenly the company starts losing that single, single voice of truth. Things are measured in multiple ways and nobody really knows. And then the third thing is you need to measure adoption. There are metrics related to reports. So you can see who's coming in the most, who's using it, how often a report's accessed. So this is actually a good key indicator. Right now, Power BI, if you have premium, and we'll talk about that in a minute, you can link Power BI to the log analytics. So you can drive further into what people are doing into Power BI. And with log analytics, you can store that for a longer period of time. The metrics on when you look at the report only last the last 90 days. So you want to see, maybe this report's only accessed once a year. So, it may not be looking like it's a good report, but it is that 1 or 2 times a year. So measuring the adoption is actually a cool way of determining if your framework is working, your governance is working, and people are using it. So the second thing we talked about was security. So one thing people ask about a lot is, do I want direct query or do I want imports? And we're going to talk about that when we get further down. But there's things to understand is that when they ask about that, I'm always like, where do you want to manage your security? You can manage it on the database DBAs love this because, you know, they really can control it very easily. Or do you want to manage it in Power BI? If you do the database, you have to use DirectQuery. And DirectQuery has an option to send the user principal name, which is like your Azure AD that you logged in with, to the source. And then the data source will determine what data you get, and that will be displayed to the report. One downside to that is everyone needs to have a connection to that data set. At row level security, it's mostly on import models where the data gets imported into memory, but it's set by the developer at the time the report's written. So that is another consideration is the person who's doing it understands how the row level security works, and that the data that you're trying to lock down is been truly locked down, or you locked it down too much and Bob in accounting can't get to the numbers he needs because he isn't a part of that security group. I'll stop there real quick. Does anybody have any questions about security?
Hey, you're doing good.
Okay. I feel like I'm going a little fast, but that's okay. Premium by capacity or premium per user. So premium features of Power BI used to be by capacity. When I was going through my notes and my docs, it was like premium's about the content. It's not about the user. So Microsoft, they created something called Gen 2 in premium, which they basically almost rewrote Power BI under the hood that allows the user to have the premium features without the cost of the capacities. As you can see here, yeah, it is $4,499 a month. I don't know why it's not $5, but it is. But it gives you, it applies to the entire tenant. So you have options. You can have pro licenses. It's called bring your own license. So for example, you shared a report with me. I would go into your tenant. I could look at the stuff and view the report you shared with me because I used my own REDAP license to get in. You're not assigning me an Office 365 license from your tenant, and users outside your tenant can get in. People don't even need to have a license at all, and they can access the data. And just so you know, that's through the workspace apps. Gen 2 is an option, and Gen 2 allows for auto scaling. I'm going to talk a little bit more what a capacity really is, but that's an option. And then you can manage your capacity. You can set the size of it, and you can set where things go. Premium per user is only $20 per month. So I think it's like $19 per month or something. It's around there. So you get all the premium features, which is cool. But you can only access the premium features if you have that license. So what that means is you assign somebody a premium per user license, and that person goes out and creates a data set and tries to share that data set, but nobody else in the company but this person has the premium per user, then no one can access that data set he created. Same with reports. If it's in a workspace that's in the premium, they won't be able to access it unless they have the premium per user license. They also can access, they also can access the pro workspaces. So it's not like, if they get to look at the pro stuff, they can also create pro reports and pro workspaces if they're available to them. The one thing that I don't like, and I'm hoping, and I put at this time, that monitoring of the premium workspace is not available like you can by capacity. So by capacity, there's an app, although I'm telling you right now, it's still broken. You can actually look at CPU usage. You can look at how much memory is being consumed. You can see which data set is taking the longest to process and why. And you can get a lot of good information. But when you use premium per user, that information is just not available to you. It's managed by the tenant. There's nothing you can do. You can't set the size. So all you can do is when you create a workspace in premium per user, so you make it a premium workspace, you can select if you're going to have large data sets or small data sets. And the difference between the two is large data sets get compressed and they're more efficient versus the smaller data set. And what they consider a large data set that's anything over 1 gig. So what is a capacity exactly? And why is it important? So a capacity is a set of resources. When you publish a port to Power BI and you go to refresh it or you go to view it, they have what's called vCores, which allow the data to be processed and presented. So what happens is it takes 4 vCores for the front end and 4 vCores in the back end. So right now, if you don't have premium, all your stuff, all your reports across your entire tenant are sharing all the vCores that are available that Power BI has given the tenant to have. And so what can happen is you get a really big report out there running, and it can actually throttle other reports. So the idea is you would buy a capacity of 8, 16, or 32, how many? And if you have capacity, you could say, I'm going to buy these 60, well, this is 32 vCores, and they decided that they're going to have 3 capacities. And so maybe they're putting their their heavy duty, big data sets that need a lot of reporting power on this one. And then these other 2 are used for something else. The capacities are sold by SKUs. If you do embed, you need to buy a SKU. They're called EM SKUs or P SKUs. Most people buy what's called a P1, which is 8 vCores. P2 is 16, P3 is 32, and anything over that, you got to call Microsoft. So here, this is premium by capacity. These are the different things that are linked, the billing, the commitment. This might be slightly out of date, I think, but you buy the premium by capacity from your office, and then you buy the premium per user license, I think, through your office e-license. One of the features that it says preview, it's not anymore, that you get in either one, which is actually a cool feature, is deployment pipelines. So deployment pipelines allow everyone who has worked in development, you always have a dev, test, and prod, or dev and prod. When it comes to reports, it gets messy because you have your dev reports that you don't want to release, and then you have your prod reports that are out there being consumed. And these deployment pipelines allow you to create workspaces on the fly that says, this is my dev, this is my test, this is my prod. And it allows you to keep them in sync. So that, and this happens a lot, and if you're having a dev and prod, the dev gets updated, or someone goes, oh, there's a bug, and you're like, oh, but it's in prod. And so what's someone do? They download the report, make the change, upload the prod, but they never update dev. So now everything's out of sync. So this is a really cool feature that you get with prod, and I just wanted to point that out. One of the things it can do now is it can actually move data flows. I don't talk about data flows, so if you want to know what data flows are, ask Lev to schedule another one. But this is a new thing that's come where you can actually deploy a data flow. And finally, Gen 2. Gen 2 is in preview, although they just released, Microsoft did. They are going to go into general availability, and they are going to require anyone who's in Power BI Premium Gen 1 to upgrade to Gen 2. And there's a timeline for which people can do it. The biggest thing here is it has better performance. There's a video by 2 guys in a cube. I think it's by Adam. He talks about what Gen 2 is and how it all works. They've actually done tests. It actually is faster, how it works under the hood. So it doesn't take as long. The bigger thing is it does scale. One of the things that people are doing with premium, you don't need to use analysis service. You can actually have your tabular models be put into Power BI. The problem is tabular models sometimes need more processing power than what your capacity that you bought has. Okay, great. They moved my 40-minute limit. Awesome. So the idea is that you can auto scale, and there's thoughts about maybe you can auto scale to another capacity like a P3, but right now you can auto scale and add on vCores as you need them. The last thing, and I think I mislabeled these long, is about sharing. I get this question a lot. What's the difference between a workspace and an app? A workspace is where you do the work, and anyone who has access to the workspace has access to every report and every data set in that workspace. An app, you can, from that workspace, and it's one workspace to one app at the moment, you can designate certain reports not to show up in the app, and the app is a view-only port. that you can publish, and it's for the ideas to distribute for large systems. So here's a little way how you can do it, because you can actually share a report, you can share a workspace, and you can share an app. It's very important to know, if you're going to share content, use the sharing link. The sharing link will actually give permission to the workspace or the report if a person didn't previously have it. What a lot of people do is they go to Power BI, they go, oh, there's my report. They grab the URL at the top and they give it to Bob in accounting, and Bob doesn't have access, and it's a whole to-do. But if they had clicked the share link will say, oh, someone wants to share this with you. I will grant you access, read-only access to this workspace for this report or this app. So in here, they're like, what kind of permissions do you need? If it's read-only, is it official? Is it a lot of people? You do the app, and then you do the workspace, or you just do sharing at one time. The last thing is performance. So again, import versus direct. There are some issues. Again, import models have to be scheduled to refresh. If you have a pro license, you can only do that 8 times in a day. Manual refreshes are not counted, by the way. If you have a premium, you can have up to 48, I think, updates in a day. Basically, it's unlimited, because if you're doing 48 updates a day, I would tell you to look at DirectQuery. Again, row level security to control the data, and of course, access to the workspaces. And it's also much faster, obviously. It's in memory. DirectQuery, every time you call it, it will query the data engine to return the data. This is good for near real-time or real-time data. It can be a little slower because, again, it has to go out and query the SQL Server, most likely. There's no schedule refresh required because it's, it's the database. But depending on how you set up the security of the DirectQuery model, the users may have to have access to the source system. Real quick, this is what it would look like. This is importing data. So the data comes into the memory, and the imported data set is sent to the service. One thing to keep note, the larger the data set, the more it will eat up the memory on your computer. This week I imported a too large one and actually blue screened my machine. That was fun. DirectQuery, again, there's no in-memory. You just create the Power BI, and what you publish to the service is the metadata of the report. And then what it'll do is it'll go and query the SQL Server whenever it's called. Only 2 more, I promise. There's something called composite model and a hybrid mode. So a composite model allows for some tables to be imported and some to be direct query. You would want to look at a composite model if, for example, you have sales transactions in your data source constantly updating and you want to track that information. But you know what? The sales reps don't change all that often. Obviously, the date table is not going to change. So those can be imported for faster service. And then Power BI will direct query the tables it needs and then use from in memory the ones that it has. Of course, you have to schedule these to get the imported ones to work. There's something called hybrid tables. It's also known as dual mode. I think they're changing the name. It can be used as an import or a direct query. So what you can do is you could set up a table to be dual mode. So for example, your DIM sales reps, maybe they change a little bit, who knows? So your sales table is, your sales fact table is in direct query because you want that real time. And you can set the DIM sales rep table to say dual mode, and Power BI will decide which mode to use for better performance. It literally has that capability. I've only used this once and I didn't really notice a difference, but it's there. Another one is, a lot of this is people don't write optimal data models. I had a client, they weren't using star schema. They had high cardinality. I mean, everything that could go wrong went wrong with their models because they just did not use the star schema. There's things you can do like turn off auto date and time. That's in the file options of the desktop that actually will reduce the model size. Some people don't use a date table to do their time measures like year, month, day. They like go out and build all the DAX around it. When a Power BI report is requested, that DAX has to build on the fly. So, you know, it's nice to have it there. They try to add everybody and their brother to this. You know, we might need every column out there, you never know. And what turns out is some of the high cardinality columns, such as, your user IDs come out of Salesforce in a very long text way. And Power BI, you don't need it for reporting, but Power BI will try to index off of it and has a hard time with it. So that might slow things down. And if you just removed it, you'd probably be better off. And then, of course, remove unnecessary rows. You want to filter. And this is a question I do ask clients. They're like, okay, we got 10 years of data. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. But are you really reporting on 10 years of data all at once? No, it's usually 2 to 3 years, right? It's the random ad hoc reports that they would write in SQL. They might build a special report to do the 10-year one. But for the most part, most people are just want a couple years and things like that. Okay, I'm going to stop here. Oh,